Hi, I am your instructor, Brad Durson, and this chapter is going to talk about elasticity of supply and demand. Now, this is probably one of the hardest chapters in microeconomics, so please watch this video very carefully, and I think that it'll help you quite a bit. Anyway, good luck. If you have any questions, please email me or Skype me. Take care, and enjoy the video. The law of demand tells us that consumers will respond to a price decrease by buying more of a product, other things remaining constant, but it does not tell us how much more. The degree of responsiveness or sensitivity of consumers to a change in price is measured by the concept of price elasticity of demand. So, if demand is elastic, there is a large change in quantity demanded, even when price changes by a small amount. When demand is inelastic, there's a very small change in quantity demanded, even when there is a large change in price. This slide shows the price elasticity of demand formula. It is a quantitative measure of elasticity. E sub D is equal to the percentage change in quantity divided by the percentage change in price. Using traditional calculations, the measured elasticity over a given range of prices is sensitive to whether one starts at the higher price and goes down or the lower price and goes up. So the midpoint formula calculates the average elasticity over a range of prices to alleviate the problem. Absolute changes depend upon the choice of units. For example, a change in the price of a $10,000 car by $1 is very different than a change in the price of a $1 can of beer by $1. The auto's price is rising by a fraction of a percent, while the beer's price is rising by 100%. Percentages also make it possible to compare elasticity of demand for different products. Because of the inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, the actual elasticity of demand will be a negative number. However, we ignore the minus sign and use absolute value. This makes it less confusing to interpret the elasticity coefficient. When the elasticity coefficient is greater than 1, it means that the percentage change in quantity demanded is greater than the percentage change in price based upon the formula. This indicates that consumers are sensitive to the change in price, so demand is elastic. When the elasticity coefficient is less than 1, the percentage change in quantity demanded is less than the percentage change in price based upon the formula, indicating that consumers are not very sensitive to price changes. Thus, it is inelastic. When the elasticity coefficient equals 1, this is a special case called unit elasticity. This means that the percentage change in price and the percentage change in quantity are exactly equal. Perfectly inelastic demand means that consumers will buy exactly the same amount no matter how high or low the price. Perfectly elastic demand means that nothing will be purchased if there is any deviation from the current price. This extreme situation is called perfectly inelastic demand, and it is very rare. The demand curve would be vertical and graphs as a line parallel to the vertical axis. The elasticity coefficient is 0. An example of a perfectly inelastic demand might be a diabetic's demand for insulin. One way in which you can remember inelastic demand is the line is straight up and down. It looks like an I. Therefore, when the demand curve is straight up and down, it is perfectly inelastic. This is an extreme situation too, in which a small price reduction would cause buyers to increase their purchases from nothing at all to everything that they could possibly obtain. It is perfectly elastic demand, and the demand curve would be horizontal. The elasticity coefficient is infinite. An example of perfectly elastic demand is a firm's demand curve in a purely competitive industry, such as the mining industry, who is unable to change the price of the product that they sell to the final consumer. One way to remember that perfectly elastic is a horizontal demand curve is to draw a horizontal line at the P over to the end of the graph, and it looks like an E. That stands for elastic. So horizontal is perfectly elastic because it looks like an E, and perfectly inelastic is vertical because it looks like an eye. The total revenue test is the easiest way to judge whether demand is elastic or inelastic. This test can be used in place of the elasticity formula, unless there is a need to determine the elasticity coefficient. The total revenue test is important to understand the relationship between price elasticity and total revenue. Demand is inelastic if a decrease in price results in a fall in total revenue, or an increase in price results in a rise in total revenue. And demand is elastic if a decrease in price results in a rise in total revenue, or if an increase in price results in a decline in total revenue. Demand is unit elastic if total revenue does not change when the price changes. A lower price and elastic demand means that total revenue will rise. The blue gain, or the extra total revenue from extra sales, exceeds the orange loss, or the loss in total revenue from the higher price. Another total revenue test. A lower price and inelastic demand means that total revenue will fall. The blue gain, or the extra total revenue from extra sales, is less than the orange loss, or the loss in total revenue from the higher price. Another total revenue test. A lower price and unit elastic demand means that the revenue is unchanged. The blue gain, or the extra total revenue from extra sales, is exactly equal to the orange loss, or the loss in total revenue from the higher price. Another way of visualizing the total revenue test. Notice that in the high price region, demand for movie tickets is elastic and revenues increase as the price goes down. But midway through, the demand for movie tickets is unit elastic and revenues stay the same as the price goes down. But in the lower price region, elasticities of demand are inelastic, meaning that revenues fall as the price falls. Here's another way of visualizing elasticity in total revenue. Take a look at both graphs, the top graph and the bottom graph. The top graph has a demand curve that's sloping downwards, and from point A to point D. As the price goes down, you can compare that to the bottom graph. You see that the revenue is going up, but in between point D to point E, as the price goes down, the revenue is fairly stable, meaning that it is unit elastic, or the elasticity coefficient is 1. And when you take a look at from point E to point H, as the price is going down, you'll see that the revenue is also going down, and that means that the elasticity of demand is inelastic. The coefficient of elasticity is less than 1. Elastic is greater than 1, unit elastic is equal to 1, and inelastic is less than 1. You can see from the graph that elasticity changes along a demand curve. Demand tends to be more elastic in the upper portion and less elastic in the lower portion, with unit elasticity being right in the middle. This slide summarizes the rules and concepts related to the elasticity of demand. Take a moment, stop, take a look at this slide, and see if you can put all of the parts together. Determinants of price elasticity of demand. With more substitutes available, consumers have more alternative options. So when there is a change in price, there is a greater percentage change in quantity demanded, making the demand more elastic. The broader definition of the market, the more elastic the demand. With a more narrow definition of the market, demand is more inelastic. And the greater proportion of income needed to buy the good, the more elastic the demand. Think about cars. If there's a change in price, because it's such a big purchase, you're going to have very elastic demand. And consumers will be more sensitive to changes in prices because the price change can result in thousands of dollars of difference. Determinants of price elasticity of demand. Since luxuries are goods that consumers can go without, they will change the amount they purchase by a greater amount, even if the price changes by a small amount. It takes time to alter the amount being purchased, so the more time available, the more elastic the demand. A person doing Christmas shopping on Christmas Eve has very inelastic demand because he or she doesn't have the time to look around for alternative purchases and ways to save money. Take a look at this table about selected price elasticities of demand. Once again, if the price elasticity of demand is less than 1, that means that it is inelastic. If it is greater than 1, that means that it is elastic. And some of the elasticities of goods in this table are surprising. Major League Baseball tickets are not only inelastic, but they are more inelastic than gasoline. And what makes newspapers, movies, and beer inelastic in comparison to restaurant meals or freshly picked peas? Applications of price elasticity of demand. Large crop yields mean that the supply of crops increases and shifts to the right. When this occurs, the equilibrium price falls. And since demand is inelastic, the lower the price actually leads to lower revenues for the farmers. Farmers are worse off when there is a large crop yield. Interesting, isn't it? Also, when governments want to impose taxes on goods, it is important for them to understand the elasticity of demand for the good. If they place a tax on a good with inelastic demand, like cigarettes, marijuana, the higher price won't decrease the quantity purchased by much, therefore increasing the amount of tax revenues that government collects. Think about it. Why do governments have government-sponsored alcohol stores? Also, if heroin and cocaine were legalized, their prices would decline according to the proponents of legislation. Demand for illicit drugs like this are inelastic for a drug addict. So if the price dropped, the amount consumed at the lower price wouldn't change by much. Crime would subsequently decline since the addicts wouldn't need to steal as much to support their habit. But opponents of legalization say that lower prices for these drugs would simply increase the quantity demanded for them and not benefit society at all, and possibly lead people into consuming drugs that may not have consumed it before. Price elasticity of supply. At higher prices, firms are willing and able to produce more, whereas at lower prices, firms are willing and able to produce less. Price elasticity of supply measures how sensitive firms are to price changes. If supply is elastic, small changes in price will result in firms greatly altering the quantity being produced. On the other hand, when supply is inelastic, the firm is unresponsive to price changes and therefore will not change the amount being produced by very much, even when the change in price is large. Price elasticity of supply. Quantitative measure of elasticity, or E sub S, is equal to the percentage change in quantity divided by the percentage change in price. The concept of price elasticity also applies to supply. We use percentages, so it doesn't matter which unit of measure we are using. The elasticity formula is the same as that for demand, but we substitute the word supplied for the word demanded everywhere in the formula. Just like with price elasticity of demand, we will compute the price elasticity of supply using the midpoint formula. Elasticity of supply will always be positive since price and quantity supplied move in the same direction. Elasticity of supply depends on how easily producers can shift resources between alternative uses in a manufacturing or service environment. The ease of shifting resources between alternative uses is very important in price elasticity of supply because it will determine how much flexibility a producer has to adjust his or her output to a change in the price. The degree of flexibility and therefore the time period will be different in different industries. The immediate market period means that there is no time to adjust output in response to a price change. Now, some industries may not have an immediate market period if they are able to store their product because if they need to change the price, they can just change it from the product coming out of storage. However, the short run means that there is enough time to adjust output by increasing or decreasing the variable inputs, like labor, but not the fixed inputs, like facility size. And the long run means that there is enough time to adjust output by increasing or decreasing all inputs. For example, if you could change the size of your factory, that would be a long run period. The immediate market period. There is no time to adjust to a price change, making supply perfectly inelastic. With a perfectly inelastic supply, the increase in demand does not change the quantity at all. As you can see from this graph, even though the demand has increased, the quantity has remained constant. It has not changed. In the short run, there is enough time to adjust output by increasing or decreasing the variable inputs, but not the fixed inputs. Supply is therefore more elastic than in the immediate market period, thereby resulting in a somewhat greater increase in quantity, as you can see with the change from Q sub 0 to Q sub S. The long run. In the long run, there's enough time to adjust outputs for everything. You can build bigger facilities, you can hire more people, you can buy more inputs. So you can adjust everything in the long run. This means that supply will be even more elastic, and with the same increase in demand, there is an even greater increase in the quantity than in the short run. In the long run, all the inputs are variable, even the size of the firm. The firm can expand, or it could reduce the size of the firm in regard to long-run prices, whether they had price increases or price decreases. Applications of elasticity of supply. Antiques and other non-reproducible commodities have an inelastic supply. For a one-of-a-kind antique, the supply is perfectly inelastic. This makes their prices highly susceptible to fluctuations in demand. The more inelastic the supply, the greater the changes in price when demand changes. Reproductions, on the other hand, like a reproduced antique, have a much more elastic supply. So the prices tend to remain lower even when there is an increase in demand. Now, gold prices are volatile because the supply of gold is highly inelastic. An unstable demand from speculation causes the prices to significantly fluctuate. Now we're getting into cross-elasticity of demand, which is a little bit more complicated. Consumption of a good can also be affected by a change in the price of a related good. Cross-elasticity of demand will provide a way to quantify the degree of change in consumption. Cross-elasticity of demand refers to the effect of a change in a product's price on the quantity demanded for another product. So if the goods are substitutes, meaning that like chicken and hamburger, you can substitute chicken for hamburger, they will have a positive cross-elasticity of demand, since the change in the price of, let's say, chicken and the change in the demand for its substitute, hamburger, move in the same direction. Now, here is a word I would like you to write down. It combines substitute and positive. It's positute. For the cross-elasticity of demand, if that is a positive elasticity, it is a substitute. And the next word is a combination of complement and negative. If the goods are complements, they will have a negative cross-elasticity of demand. Now put those two words together, complement and negative. Complementatory, write that down. Complementatory. So if the goods are complements, they will have a negative cross-elasticity of demand, since the change in the price of one good and the demand for its complement move in opposite directions. Complement, negatory, cross-elasticity of demand. If the goods are unrelated, they will exhibit a cross-elasticity of 0. Companies can use cross-price elasticity to determine whether raising the price of one of their products will affect sales of another of their products. For example, in the Coca-Cola line, if Coca-Cola raises prices on one of their sodas, how is it going to affect sales of another one of its sodas? And the government, too, can use it to determine whether to allow a proposed merger of two companies or not. If there is a high cross-price elasticity between the two companies' products, the government will likely not allow the merger. Income elasticity of demand. Consumption of a good can also be affected by a change in income. Income elasticity of demand is a measurement that reflects the percentage change in quantity demanded due to some percentage change in the consumer's income. Most goods are normal goods that have a positive income elasticity, but the value of elasticity of income can vary widely among these goods. Consumers decrease their purchases of inferior goods, like hot dogs, when their income rises. And as their income rises, they may purchase more normal goods, such as hamburgers. Therefore, that would be a positive income elasticity of demand. Those industries that are income elastic will expand at a higher rate as the economy grows. And here are some insights on income elasticity. Income elasticity helps us understand which products and industries will be most affected when household incomes fall during economic downturns. If a product has a lower negative income elasticity, it is not affected that much by a recession. And here's another table that I'd like you to stop the recording a little bit and look at the table and evaluate it. This table summarizes many of the characteristics of cross-price elasticity and income elasticity. And we will conclude with elasticity and pricing power. Some firms have market power or pricing power that allows them to set their products at prices that are in their best interest. For some goods and services, firms may find it advantageous to determine differences in price elasticity of demand and then charge different prices to different buyers. For example, business air travelers have a more inelastic demand for air travel, so they are charged higher prices since they will still pay it. And families are sensitive to prices, so firms will charge lower prices for children as a result of the more elastic demand. And students from low-income households are offered assistance with paying for college since they have a higher price elasticity of demand. And students from high-income households will pay full price for their education unless they receive some type of merit-based scholarship.